Hey, folks, welcome back to Right Side Up in honor of Steve Staggs. It is Stephen Friday again. It is November 8th, 11 a.m. Central Time. Super excited about this stream. So glad that you're here. It's a really interesting time. Have you seen or experienced or felt the shift in attitude? I mean, there's opportunity, there is optimism. Of course, there's a lot of people that are, I think, a little upset with the way that the election went. But Steve had some really interesting, thoughts about these things, and I think it's really helpful to revisit them and talk about the things that really matter, right? Things like purpose, right? Why are we here? Why are we here? And what is it all about? And so, I'm just so glad that you're here. We're streaming on Christians in Crypto and on X platform today. I have decided to kind of split out some of the crypto heartbeat stuff from Right Side Up. This is episode 75. So more than 150 hours of content. And it's kind of a milestone in a strange sort of way, but it's just amazing we've gotten here. But I'm just so thankful. I continue to be amazed by how God has used Steve, in my life, and I'm sure in yours. And so this is going to be a real special time. Just say hello to my friends. This is Florida Mystery Man Mike. Good morning, Matt. Good morning, Steve. Good morning, Jesus. Jesus, I've got it that you've got it. And that's so good. That was last episode. It's so great to just relate to that. Ego Foundation, hello, with Jesus. And there he is, Carter Hill. Sorry I missed you last time. Changed the places that I've been streaming. And so it is so good to have you here as well, Carter. And I did get your email. I just haven't responded to you. So, folks, let's jump into the content today. This is a really special one. I was searching stevestaggs.com. So if you want to get into the content and you want to search all of this content, you have the ability to do that at stevestaggs.com. You can go in and search for any keyword. And the word I used here was transaction. I was looking to get information about the truth in the transaction. And what I got was even so much more. And so I think this is going to be a huge, huge blessing to you. Welcome to Right Side Up in honor of Steve Staggs. Here we go. Let's jump into the content right now. Transaction. Can you drill down on that?
Sure. Okay, let's go back to the question about the garden. Why did Satan wait to enter into his transaction with the serpent before he approached Eve? So why did he wait until after the animals were named?
Because that's how he got his authority, right?
Pardon?
That's how he got his authority.
No, because he did not have the authority.
Oh, no. So I'm sorry. He was underneath Adam. What I mean, I'm using the wrong term. You're right. But what you're saying is Adam named them first, which showed his authority over him.
Yes.
And he comes in after he is under the authority of man, because otherwise he wouldn't have to fool anybody.
Well, sort of. Okay. For clarification's sake, there are three classifications of beings in God's creation. There's the Elohim, which is the ruling class. There's angelic class, which is the ministering class. There is the animal class, which is the serving class. Man is a part of the Elohim class. And not only is he a part of the Elohim class, he is the highest order in the Elohim class, in the ruling class. Okay? Now, so when Jehovah brought the animals to Adam to see what he would name them, it was to establish, as you shared just a minute ago, to establish his authority over the animals. The reason that Satan did not come before that time was because he did not possess the authority to rule, which is then a component of naming.
Yeah.
When you named your children, it's because you had the authority to rule.
Yeah.
See, I don't have the authority to rule your children.
Right.
See, so I can name them anything I want to name them. Wouldn't make any difference. There was nothing in there. So now in the kingdom, what is comprised, and what does a name comprised of? What is the purpose and importance of a name? It is because in the kingdom dynamic, the name is the repository for all that God put into that being when he created it. Wow. See, so his name shall be called Jesus. God saves.
Okay, pause for just a second.
Okay.
Blow in my mind. because because an angel appeared and told them, basically God said, like, the name of Jesus was not given to him by Mary and Joseph in the sense of like I gave my kids names. They were told what to name him. Wow.
Yep. See? Because there was a repository in that name, was the repository of all that God had vested in that person, Jesus, through the name.
And there's so much power to the name too. That's what's amazing. And you see so many examples of that. Wow.
Well, your signet ring concept.
Yeah.
Okay. What happened? Your name is now verified and validated through the grant of the signet ring.
Yeah.
See, that signet ring is not given to me. My name carries no authority regarding that signet ring. Only your name does.
Yeah.
See, it is a powerful, powerful concept when you look at it, and then you start understanding, in certain instances why God changes a name, and in another instance, Satan disregards a name.
Yeah.
Or he says, or he actually acknowledges it. Are you coming before the time? Jesus, are you coming before the time to judge us? Is that what you're planning to do? Are you going to use your name, your authority, your station and position in all of creation to unlawfully ban us?
Yeah.
Temptation.
Yeah.
See? So now let's go back into the garden. So Satan did not have the authority to name, because in the name he did not have the authority to rule, which is a component of naming. When I name, I have the authority to rule that absence of a name. That's why I've been created. Remember, the Father's vision is that his man would rule his creation with him in the fullness of his nature and character. So in the grant of a name is not only the full authority that's vested with that name, but it's also filled with the goodness of God. That's its intention. So now, how did Satan go from a spiritual being? He's a great fun discussion to talk about as well. But for now, how did he decide to go to the serpent to try to engage transaction with him? Why did he pick the serpent? Why didn't he pick a beetle, an eel?
Who's the most crafty?
Oh, but why was he the most crafty?
Was it his attributes?
Well, where did those attributes come from?
God gave him, created them.
Okay. And who named them to establish the repository of that serpent as distinct from other animals having those attributes?
Adam himself.
Adam did. And Adam said, this one has been granted the authority, the attributes is a better term.
Yeah.
The attributes of being wise, of being shrewd, of being crafty. This is the dude who's going to, as a serving class being, is to help aid my man in executing his responsibility on the planet. And Adam saw him and said, you're the dude that's most wise of all the beings that God has created to operate on the land. You're the man who's going to be called the serpent, and serpent, your job is to help me. Satan said, okay, that's the one that I want to talk to, because that's the one who is the repository of shrewdness, of sensibility, of intelligence, of craftiness. Not craftiness in order to exploit, but craftiness in goodness, to be able to navigate around difficult situations that will confront you as life unfolds in all of its dynamics. There is somebody who must understand how to navigate around these things in a shrewd and crafty manner. In good. So Satan said, that's the one, because that's the one that Adam vested with the authority to speak to him to gain counsel, is how we might otherwise say it. Wow. Okay. So what happened? Satan said, okay, I want to engage contract with that one. So he engaged in transaction with the serpent. How do we know that? Because the serpent acted as his agent. He transferred his message. The serpent could have said no. Now, why was the serpent vulnerable to that? Because he was part of the serving class. He was designed in his makeup to serve. Okay, part of the serving class. So you know that there is a transaction that occurs between Satan and the serpent, and then the serpent goes to Eve and engages in this transaction with Eve.
And she wasn't surprised he was talking.
Nope. She just engaged conversation with him like it was an everyday event. Yeah, man, I got this problem. Don't quite know how to act wisely in this particular situation. It's kind of got me, by the tail here. I'm not quite understanding how to deal with this. Oh, I know how to deal with that. I know how to deal with that. Well, what is your advice, Mr. Serpent? Well, there's this tree over there. And didn't God give you all this liberty? Well, why don't you exercise your liberty?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but he says if I do, I can exercise my liberty with everything except for this one thing. There's this one limitation. Well, what's that limitation? We're not to eat. Not only are we not to eat, we're not to touch it, we're not to strike it. We're just to keep our distance. Nah, if we don't, if we eat it, if we touch it, if we strike it, we're going to die. Now, my question is, what did dying look like to Eve?
Yeah. Yeah. Good question.
See, that was a meaningless term to Eve. What was dying? What was death? What was that? That's like the first time I looked at a balance sheet and I looked at right? And I looked on the liability side and saw stockholder equity, and I said, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. How is stockholder equity a liability on a balance sheet? See, that's something of value. What is it doing over there? It didn't have meaning to me. I'd suggest death had no meaning to her. And so the wise one said to her, no, you're not going to die. See? Actually, what's going to happen is you're going to become like the Elohim, knowing the difference between good and evil. What to do, what not to do. What's in my best interest, what's not in my best interest. What the right thing to do and what the wrong thing to do is. Man, that's exactly what I need. Okay, let's do that. Now, the moment that happens, see the transaction that's going on? Now, here's this interesting thing that Paul says, the Apostle Paul says, and he poses it in the form of a question. Questions are powerful because they open up the mind and they get you to think. And they go, oh, yeah, how about that? And you've experienced that yourself. We all have. He says, do you not know? And actually, here's how he puts it. Do you not see with your physical eyes to peer into the spiritual world, to understand and comprehend that the voice you listen to and obey and under whose authority you act, you are a slave?
Wow.
Oh, as a man thinks, so is he. Okay, if I want to control him and he is of a greater authority than I am, I have to fashion the way he thinks. So if I can get him to think the way that I think, the way I want him to think, I can control him and he won't even fight me. He'll just be that. Do you not know the voice you listen to and under whose authority you act, you are a slave to that voice? And we have been doing that ever since.
Yep.
So Satan did not come in through his agent, the serpent, to exercise power as by force. He did it through cunning because he had no authority to rule. He had to have Adam and Eve transfer their authority to rule to him. And we're doing it today. We're doing this exact same thing today. We continue to transfer our authority because we don't understand naming rights. We don't understand who we are. We don't understand how the game is played. And so we get sucker punched one time after another. Now, here's what happened as a result. We talked about it before. All of a sudden, once Adam transferred his authority over the earth, that he was given charge to rule with God, once that happened, then everything was turned upside down. The man who lived forever was now going to die. The man who lived as a recipient of the abundance of provision that came through the earth was now living in scarcity. The earth that was to serve him, he now had to serve the earth. See, all of these things were turned upside down. The one whom he spoke with freely every day, Jehovah, and spoke with him, about all of the things that life had to offer. Now, all of a sudden, he was now afraid to hear his voice. See? The one who lived in purity was now ashamed because he was naked. Upside down. Boom. Now, thing is, we're the ones that still possess the authority to rule. We just got to quit giving it to the serpent, if you will. And how do we do that? By the very declaration that you made in our last conversation. Jesus, you alone have authority to speak to me. You alone have the authority to direct my life and every decision that flows out of that. Once you learn to do that, the door is shut on the serpent and things start turning right side up.
Wow. You know, what's amazing about this conversation? This is fantastic, man. Like, wow. Oh my goodness. So what I want folks to notice about what Steve just shared, because obviously it's just amazing and I'm just like blows my mind in a wonderful way, is that Steve never said, hey, here's how you get saved. You notice that, folks? I think it's really important to note. I think a lot of people have been told, and here's this amazing thing. You know, I'm reminded of the seed that fell on the path. And Jesus talks about the story of those who, the seed that falls, and some of it gets choked out, some of it gets trampled underfoot, some of it grows up and produces fruit. And there's so many different stories that, you know, if you start engaging with this idea, right, you say, all right, who has authority over me? And I think that that's this a big idea. It's the idea. It's the whole thing, right? The simplicity of everything. It's everything. It's like, whose voice are you going to listen to? And Taryn mentioned this earlier, Steve, and I just want to kind of try this on for size. Is it possible? You know, you defined that the voice of Jesus can come in so many different ways, like a parent. It can be intention. It can be circumstance. It can be a feeling. It doesn't have to be like spoken English words.
Yeah.
It can be a number of things. There's something, though, really interesting about this idea of declaring, because we're talking about this idea of speaking and declaring who we belong to and who we're committed to listening to. And it seems so much more pure to me, because when I remember when I had 1,000 pounds lifted off my back, and I was there going, oh, and I started laughing. I'm like, the implications of this, you know, like basically I'll never be the same. Yeah. And, you know, we talked about so many different things about how God gave new names to everybody. And, you know, we read scripture about a new creation in Christ, this idea that the old is gone and the new has come. And what I think it sits at the very epicenter of this is, whose voice are you going to listen to, one, and two, has authority over you completely.
Yeah.
And I think that what I love about that is, this isn't what church you go to.
No.
This isn't, well, daddy was a Quaker. This is not that. And a lot of times I think what's amazing about this is, why do people have such a problem with Christians? This is why. Because we are not under the authority and we're not listening to the voice. And I think what's amazing about this is, it's like everything falls away, Steve, because this is just an observation of this. You know, I'm always, you know, crypto heartbeat, right? Trying to tell people, hey, consider other people, love people, right? Like we win together because we're working together, and we can, you know, and there's grace in that. There's all kinds of things in that. But if you think about it, what really is going on here? What is money? When Lambo? All that kind of stuff. And I just reminded of these coins in this bottle. Is that why are your 23 people here? Because, you know, there's something that's drawing you to this, to say, hold on a second. Money and all these things that I've heard, and even when I've gone to church and when I've heard, you know, people kind of tell me something, it's fallen flat. And that's how I felt for 28 years of my life. I was like, this stuff is hokey. This stuff doesn't have any power. This stuff it's like you're playing a game. And I almost question whether it's authentic for you. It's almost like you feel like you have to repeat this stuff because somebody told you this stuff. But then you run into somebody like you, Steve, and I've had people in my life where I'm like, hold on, there's something different here. And it's really interesting to say, and we can, I don't want to talk about it, you know, get into this right now. But you asked me the other day, because I've dealt with massive anxiety in the past, and it creeps up on me a lot. And, you know, and when I embrace this stuff and examine it, because I'm thinking about this stuff all the time, is well, if I'm listening to his voice and I'm doing what he tells me to do, and I'm testing all of these things, and I'm giving him authority fully with everything. You asked me the question, you said, Matt, what's your intent? Because what you've helped me understand is this idea that I'm making choices.
Yeah.
You know, I've got this ability to make choices. And I feel like the Christian worldview right now, and a lot of what I would consider to be stale Christianity, is a lot about rules and behavior, right? Like act a certain way, this outcome, right? It's like you said, I could shine the fruit up. But it feels like it's a lot focused on, well, if you aren't if you ladies aren't wearing skirts and you don't cover your hair and you're not doing this or that or the other, we're being distracted by all of these activities. And it seems like the purest form of the gospel, if you really boil it down, is like yelling at you. It's yelling at you through the scriptures, not in a bad way, but it's like, it's amazing to me that everything you've told me and everything I've looked in the scriptures, it's like it came out of it as, well, duh. But it's almost like I didn't see it.
No.
But then when I look back at it, I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, when they went up the mountain, he's like, yeah, listen to him. He's my son. Oh, and then yeah, he's going to remind you of everything you said. And he speaks. And then he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's like sweating blood, and he's having a conversation with the Father, going, hey, he's listening to the Father. He says, I don't go anywhere. And then you said to me the other day, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. You said, the sheep recognize the shepherd's voice. We talk about that because that just like to me, that was just like dropping the anvil on my head.
Well, yeah, and in the context of the verses that you're referring to, Jesus is talking about a lot of false prophets, a lot of false teachers, a lot of false messiahs, on and on are show up, and what they do is they don't go through the gate. They try to climb in through some other mechanism. They shortchange it. And the reality is they have to do those things because they don't have the horsepower authority to do that, to be a shepherd. So they have to come in with some other way. By the way, that's exactly the way Satan came into the garden. He didn't present himself as, an angelic being. He presented himself through the serving class servant. Why? Why did he do that? Because he had to come in through some other way. He couldn't come directly through, if you will, the gate. Remember the gates with the flaming soil?
Yeah, swords, yeah.
There was an appropriate way to enter into the garden. He couldn't do that. He had to come in through some other way. And so Jesus was saying, listen, the shepherd has some very unique characteristics about him. His character is that he will give his life for the sheep. His character is to give that which is most important to him for the benefit of those over whom he is caring. He is exercising an authority that is different. And when you are exposed to that different authority, when you are exposed to that different nature and character, when you are exposed to that one who speaks to you in a certain way, not the words he speaks, but the nature and the character that are saturating his words, you come to recognize them. And every other voice is an assault against that. Why? Because those voices don't possess that. They don't have the nature and character. So eventually the sheep learn to hear the shepherd's voice, and the voice of a stranger, those who do not possess that nature and character, they won't listen to.
Yeah.
Because it's inferior. It is contrary to all things that are good. Now, here's the deal. The sheep weren't born sheep. See, they were born lambs. See, and they had to learn over time. They had to engage the game, like May, was it named Chris May or Charles May or whatever the last week?
Oh, John May.
John May.
Yeah.
Conversation to John. Same thing with Taryn.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn this from a distance. You have to engage the game. If you want to learn how to play the game, you got to get in the game. Well, guess what? Sometimes when you're in the game, you get knocked on your butt.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get struck out. Sometimes things happen to you where it appears like you are losing. Well, guess what? You're not losing. You're learning how to play better. Your adversary is actually teaching you how to play at a higher level. Let him teach you. See, you're not giving him authority to be your teacher. What you're doing, you've already given authority to Jesus. And if he wants to use him, let him use him.
Wow.
Because he's going to fulfill his responsibility, the reason he was created, which was to protect the throne of God. And so he protects the throne of God in us by teaching us how to play at a higher level. Anyway.
Well, don't you think so? Yeah, this is amazing. I'm gonna summarize because this is my favorite one. This is so great. I can't believe it. Every time it's just like something special happens that we didn't intend, and something special has happened that we did not intend.
Huh.
I mean, we wanted to share this kind of interaction that we have with people, but to me, this has been like I'm seeing things anew each time we talk. One of the things I think that I'm taking away from this, because I see myself in people's shoes, right? Because I feel like I've really questioned a lot of stuff. I'm just like, this doesn't resonate. And so this idea of giving and actually saying these things, because we talked about this last week, we are like, well, Matt, do you want to basically submit to Jesus's authority completely in your life and listen to his voice? Well, I would say this: all things, all fullness, like this is the direct connect to the creator of all things.
Yeah.
Do you think the creator of all things, who created time, created all of these things, everything, all these dynamics, knows what's best for you? If he is there to protect, right, and bless, I want to be in the protection and blessing of the one who created it all.
Yeah.
So, I think about this idea of, hey, try it on for size, right? One of the things that I think we see is, and what's striking me is this idea that just going and saying, I want to hear from the spiritual realm, you may hear something.
Oh, yeah.
But the question is, you need to understand that even Eve was deceived to give authority away, and there's one that's prowling around. And I think what's interesting is, I think we think of of Satan as a pitchfork, horns, and red spandex. That's how I always like to describe it, and like flames, right? And it's so much different. It's almost like, what do they say in The Usual Suspect? The greatest deceit the devil ever did was to convince man he didn't exist. That craftiness of saying, you think that I'm just gonna burn you up here, or I'm gonna take you out or kill you. No, 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 no. I'm just gonna make you ineffective. I'm just gonna make you lukewarm. I'm gonna lie to you and say that um, you can do it yourself. You can go your own way. You have choice. You know that you have the knowledge of good and evil now. Go your own way. Kick your own doors down. Make it happen. Hustle. And there's truth to the sense that there is. I've been seeing this. This has happened with me since starting this channel. I feel an obligation to stream.
Yeah.
And I feel obligation to share. But also selfishly, I know that I'm accumulating something that I can pass to my kids. And I think about it a lot. Like, some people are just like, let's do TA on Hex. I think about this and I go, hold on. When I'm gone, my kids are probably going to watch this stuff.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, I better, at least share this process and share these things. And to me, it's like a diary, right? You're like recording these things. Wow. Wow. I hope that's a blessing to you, man. I'll tell you, I listened to that previously and I've just listened to it again. And I get something every single time from it. I hope it's been impactful to you. Let's talk about this. These are the ahas again for what, third time for me now. Is Steve started talking about this naming rights, where we're talking about this authority in the garden. And of course, when you start to drill into this and ask it questions, Steve said the truth is probable. Okay, the truth. Well, Jesus is the truth, right? I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. Okay. So we're going to probe the truth. Well, what's probing the truth? We're going to ask the truth. Who is the truth? Jesus. We're going to ask him. Well, all right, Jesus, how do you see this? Only you. You're the only one I give authority to speak to me. So I was talking to a friend who did psilocybin. And of course, I've watched stuff on people who do DMT or any drugs for that matter that are hallucinogenic. And, there's a guy named Graham Hancock who has this show on Netflix called Ancient Apocalypse. And he talks about the influence of psychedelics in basically the creation of civilization. And think about this, that, throughout history, we've recognized that there's this spiritual realm. And I think it's really interesting to see that what's the first commandment? You shall have no other gods before me. Why would you say that? Is it like, hey, I want to establish a monotheistic religion? No, because there are other gods, lowercase g. There are other spirits. And of course, I've talked to people who have done these things and they're like, hey, they offer you things and they're good things. I know a number of people who said, have overcome these challenges through, hallucinogens and all that stuff. Well, there is a spiritual realm. And what's interesting is when you understand this hierarchy, there's three classes. there's this ruling class, and it looks like in the Elohim class, there's more than just us. And you think about the Yahweh of the Elohim, which would be Jesus himself, right? The author, right? He's the guy that all things were created for him and by him. And so we're a part of that family, right? We've been grafted in, adopted as sons, right? We are, and we have this knowledge of good and evil, which was the intent all along, that you would understand the difference. But we gave away this authority. And of course, this crafty one, and how amazingly this idea of naming rights. Well, let me give you a practical example of this. Post-election here, I've been hearing all these people talk about these things. Like, I saw a woman crying. She's like, I'm going to be a slave. She was an African-American woman. Then I heard these other people saying, basically Trump's going to kill you. Like, well, think about all this fear and think about all this identity politics. Well, what's the basis of it? It's naming rights. I'm going to name you. I'm going to scare you, right? Because the battle is for how you think. And so you're listening to these people, and there are literally people who are like, the number one issue is women's reproductive rights. And women are going to vote, and this is going to be Kamala's thing because that's what this is about. And what's interesting is the very nature of your identity, who you are, is being questioned, right? Well, you're a racist, or you're a woman, or you're a man, or, the very nature of identity. And of course, where are these lies? What are the net effect of these lies? The net of the effect of these lies is to diminish or deplete or to kill or destroy human life, right? So it's really amazing the results of these lies, even to today, come back to this idea of renaming. He's a fascist, he's Hitler, or whatever it may be. But people are doing this. This is what happens, right? You want to control someone, you control the way they think, and you convince them they're someone else. And of course, I've mentioned it many times. You could ask 100 people, on the street, who's more powerful, the angels or man? And 99% of them would say, well, it's got to be the angels are stronger than men. Oh, no. This is the lie. Even you will rule over the angels. So understanding our place in this hierarchy, understanding our role, we have been given dominion, right? We've been given this ability to rule and reign. Well, what it comes down to is we think of sin as these actions. Well, no, sin is doing anything apart from God, right? And so I think the mystery, the amazing thing of this transfer, which happens, this new creation that happens as a result of giving Jesus your authority and saying, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me, is this ability to say, okay, how do you see this? Every situation, I'm going to hold this thought captive. I'm going to say, hey, how do you see this thing? And that was modeled by Jesus when he's here. I don't do anything unless the Father's doing it. Tells me to do it, right? This is my son, listen to him. Man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Okay, I got it. Okay. So what you're saying is, I can ask you in every possible situation, but be wary, right? There are those that are creeping around trying to destroy you. Well, what is this? Well, the gift is really discernment, this knowledge of good and evil. There are two trees and they look good and they both have fruit. But the Lord God said, hey, watch out for this one. Don't touch it, don't strike it, you will surely die. Well, what is death? And of course, Satan coming in through this alternative means, didn't come through the front door, came through the serpent and lied and basically said, hey, if you eat of this, you will be like the Elohim. No, and this is the revelation. No, you already are Elohim. But the intent all along was that you would be able to discern between good and evil, that you would be able to discern between look-alikes, because people are going to come and they're going to tell you that you aren't who you are. And Steve talked to me at the very beginning of all this when we started in conversation is you've forgotten who you are. You are part of the ruling class. You are a child of God. You are a son of God. You are in the Elohim class. You have the ability to rule and reign. But that ability to rule and reign is your free choice. Who are you going to do it with? Who are you going to listen to? And we see this across the board. People are listening to someone other than Jesus. And what happens? He calls that sin, going your own way. But the greatest adventure of my entire life is knowing and understanding this. All right, Jesus, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? What's next? How do you see this? And what's amazing, I had this experience and I've been, talking to Jesus about it. And I'll share it with you just because we're among friends. But we're right at this edge of this enormous breakthrough. And I'm asking him, hey, where is this resource coming through? Because you spoke it. And if you spoke it, it's complete. And it's in your timing, and I trust your timing. But where is the resource coming from? And this is what he told me. He said, it's in the bricks. I didn't understand what that meant. That won't mean anything to you. But literally, he said, it's in the bricks. And I saw these bricks on a floor. And in between the bricks was mortar, and this mortar was glowing red. And there was light coming out of these bricks. And I was like, what in the world does that mean? Well, I've been having a conversation about it. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And what's so cool about it is when he speaks, it's complete. Right? This process of walking these things out is according to his timing. Right? There's the chronology of time. That's the clock or the wristwatch, if you will. There is the kairos time. This is Jesus, God's timing. And then there is the fullness of time when these things cross. And so waiting on the Lord, right? We're learning things, we're walking with him in this process, but he provides for us in that process. So no matter what you're dealing with, you can bring it to him. And that's why, like Mike, for example, when Mike was under the knife and he's like, hey, this presence, the sense of Jesus. I saw something online the other day. It's really cool. It's one of these, videos where a father had a son who was dying. And he was really at the edge of death. And this boy, he's a young boy, probably 10, and he couldn't speak. He was at that point in his process. And the dad could tell that he needed to write, or he wanted to write, or wanted to communicate. So he gave the boy a pen. And the boy scribbled on this piece of paper in the post. It shows the picture of it. And he writes in this like 10-year-old scraggly pen, Jesus is real. Meaning he's seeing him and, in this process being ushered into this new life. And I think about Steve, who passed after episode 37. Here we are on episode 75. And here I listen to it. And every time I listen to it, it's the truth. It's probable. And Steve always said this. He said, don't try, don't listen to me. Well, he said, listen to me, but don't like assume that what I'm telling you is true. Ask him yourself. And I think what's really cool is this idea of going, hey, how do you see this? Is that process, right? Jesus is alive and he speaks and he's a loving father. And he's like, interested in your every inquirer, and he will set before you things you have not seen. Yeah, Carter just said, Jesus is perfect strategic timing. And I joked with Steve, and I still think strategic is like not a good word because it doesn't encompass how beautiful it is. It's the best word we've got, but it's almost like it's strategy. No, it's just like, when it's of him, because it's like, I almost compare it to like those diamonds that are like multifaceted, and you turn it and it like shines at you, but it shines everywhere at the same time. So you get a glimpse of like this facet and that facet and that facet. And then everyone else in the room is like, it's just, it just rings, right? It has a resonance to it, and it impacts so many different people and all those things. Because of course, when we go our own way, we can kick down a door, we can run a marathon, we can do a certain number of things, but it's almost like, well, anything apart from, faith is sin. Well, what is faith? Faith comes through hearing. Hearing what? The spoken words of Jesus. And what's so amazing is I go to this church on Sundays, and great worship time and fantastic. And the pastor, it's almost like he's got it half right. He's like, yeah, man, we listen to Jesus, right? And I'm like, yeah, we listen to Jesus. Woohoo. And then we turn around on the other side, and it's like the authority of the Bible. It's like, hold on a second. Okay. Are we listening to Jesus, or are we not listening to Jesus? Do we assume that he's alive, or do we not assume he's alive? And it's the, double-minded out of both sides of the mouth. And no wonder he says, you're lukewarm. I'll spit you out. You have a form of godliness, but you deny its power. Folks, this look at the science-y people will say, we're in a simulation. Well, yeah, we're in a creation. And this thing is eternal. And you're in a creation of which there are rules. And what's amazing is I think we're coming into a time, and I um I mentioned this on my streams I've had recently, but the night of the election, I uh I went to bed at about midnight, so it hadn't been officially called yet. And I was a little bit concerned because last time I fell asleep, what happened from that? And I went to bed and I laid down there, and my wife had already been asleep, and I just couldn't sleep very much. I kind of laid down, and literally I had like a lightning bolt hit my head. Like, I mean, loud boom, my whole body jolted. And it was like as if I got hit. I was like, am I having a stroke? But it obviously wasn't. And it was an interesting kind of demarcation for me. Did something like literally just change? And what's amazing about it is, what is the real change? The real change is the decisions you make and in what nature and character they're made. And the thing I would encourage people is Jesus is always standing there. Steve described him as one who is standing in a whirlwind. Imagine a tornado, right? All this debris and everything, and there's Jesus standing in the middle, in the quiet of the center of this whirlwind. And he's asking you, come, come, come stand here with me. And of course, there's all kinds of references in the scriptures to you're seated with him in the heavenlies. Here, come, have my perspective of this whirlwind. You're on the outside of this thing getting beat up by, 2x4s to the head. Come stand with me. See what this life is like. See it from my perspective. And of course, we see this with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's a stone's throw away from the disciples, and they're falling asleep. And he goes and he's sweating blood, which I think is a representation of some difficulty. And it says that he literally says to him, basically, remove this cup from me. Like, if there's any other way we can do this, right? And the humanity of Jesus in that moment of sweating blood and this knowing of going to the cross, of what this is. He's knowing where he's going. He's asking the Father, and he's bringing a request. And I think what's amazing about this demonstration to us is the fact that we go to him with these requests, and he says, "Hey, let's gain perspective on what we're doing here. How will the scriptures be fulfilled if we do not do what we plan to do?" And of course, when we talk to Jesus, when we go to him with these, prayers and petitions, we hear from him, and he gives us a new perspective. And what is that? Steve described it as an atomic packet of faith. And if you look at the word, right, in the Greek and in the Hebrew of what actually prayer is, it's this engagement, it's this listening, it's this hearing, it's this gaining of perspective from the creator of all things. What you gain from that is his perspective, and you're changed by it. And with that comes faith, because faith comes from hearing. The question is, have you ever asked him, hey, how do you see this? One of the things Steve mentioned in that clip was the fact that, like, the day before that, I literally said, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me. And of course, I've told you stories about how I've had situations where literally the spirits would say to me, right? The demonic spirits would say to me, hey, you just need to kill yourself. I'm like, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me. Satan, you have no standing here. Go away. And he flees from you. And of course, you hear this throughout history, right? No, we have the authority. Stop giving it away. It's like, all right, no, I need your perspective in this situation because this is really difficult. I'm sweating blood. Okay, here you go. Here's my perspective. And so Jesus modeled this very behavior, right? Man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out. So our life is literally out of every word that comes out. And so you want to have a better life, a better experience, a journey to fulfill the very purposes of why you were created, and to do that with him in the fullness of his nature and character, and fulfilling the very purpose, which turns the entire world right side up. Ask him. Ask him and he'll show you. He'll show you. And the cool thing about this is, what's your intent? Who are you speaking to? And a couple of times ago, which I thought was hilarious, we were reviewing this, and I said to Steve, I said, my son was asking, well, how do you know it's Jesus you're talking to? I said, well, when you want to come talk to me, do you go talk to the dog? And my son laughs, ha, 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 ha. If you want to talk to me, do you go talk to the dog? No. If you want to talk to me, do you go read your Bible? I mean, you can read your Bible. It's a good thing. It's useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the man of God is fully equipped for every good work. It's a good resource. But the question is, who is the source? And you go to him and you're like, well, you have to recognize that he exists. And he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Well, all right, let's earnestly seek him. Let's ask him. Because for me, it used to be like the only time Jesus is alive is on Easter Sunday. Like, hey, he's risen, man. Woohoo. No, he's alive. And he speaks. And of course, this whole thing comes down to this thing. Are you interested? No, I got it from here. I'll take it from here. Well, that's the story of the prodigal son. And I'm always committed to telling the story because I love it. Prodigal son goes to his father and says, I want my inheritance now while you're still alive. And the father obliges him. He's like, yeah, okay, here you go. Father knowing full well what was going to happen. Son goes and squanders the inheritance in wild living. And then he gets a job because he doesn't have any more money. He finds himself feeding the pigs. And he recognizes something. He's like, even the servants in my father's house eat better than this. What if I went back? Do you think he would make me one of his servants? Could I actually have some provision? And in this process, he decides he's going to go back. And as he approaches the father's house, which I think is the picture of this whole thing, he understood the nature and character of his father. And of course, he humbled himself and he approached his father's house. And what did he find? He thought his father, well, it's going to be mad. Nope. God's not mad at you, by the way. That's a really important thing for you to hear. God is not mad at you. God loves you. He's a father. Just like as a father or mother loves someone, you love a child. Okay. And so he comes running out after him. And what does he do? And of course, the son, in his humility, is like, man, I've sinned against you and against God. Basically going, man, I really screwed this thing up. And what does the father do? He's like, yay, my son, he was dead. And now he's alive. How did he become alive? He recognized the nature and character of the father. He came back to the father's house. And what happened was he was kissed by his father on his neck, and a robe was put on him, and a ring was put on his finger. They killed the fattened calf, had a party, all that stuff, right? Welcomed back into the fold. And I messed this up the first time I talked about it with Steve. I was like, yeah, look, he got the authority of the ring. He goes, no, he was a son all along. He had forgotten who he was, right? Maybe I could be a servant. No, you're a son. Do not forget, you're a son. You have the authority to rule and reign. But he said, without me, you can do nothing. I am the vine. You are the branches. So what is that you are drawing from? Because that fruit that's at the end of the branch draws its water, right? It draws, like I think about grapes. If it rains a lot before harvest, what it does, it dilutes the grapes. But what does it draw from? It draws from the vine. Well, there's no wonder he said, without me, you can do nothing of any eternal consequence. So what an amazing thing. The father gives him a ring. And what is that ring? In that time was a signet ring. It was the signature of the father. It was the signature of the household. It was authority to be the impression of the father. And I think about that story every single time, and I think, wow, coming back to the father, recognizing his nature and character, humbling ourselves and going, all right, how do you see this? And it's like, I got work for you to do. Here's a ring. Here's authority. Let's go. And that's a process by which we recognize this. And so many people come to understand this in very, very difficult circumstances, addiction, prison, crisis in their life. And what's interesting is I think it was Ego Foundation says there are no mistakes, only lessons. Yeah, don't miss the lesson here, right? Because these things, all things that were created, will fulfill their purposes. And of course, that's why I said, consider it pure joy when facing trials of many kinds, because we don't see them as being preparation for the next thing. David, why was he equipped to fight Goliath? Because he fought the lion and the bear. Do you think when he was fighting the lion or the bear, he was like, "Hey, this is exciting. Let's consider it pure joy." He's probably going, probably like, "This is bad." Well, he had confidence when going in to fight Goliath. I fought the lion and the bear. Get this, I don't need Saul's armor on me. Folks, this journey to think about, in this era where information is coming at you in many different directions, people are talking about all kinds of crazy things like, you know, UFOs and UAPs and, you know, people drilling down into the very building blocks of life, understanding the framework of things from a scientific perspective. It's all leading back to the same place. And I think that's why we're seeing so many people in the kind of the scientific world are coming to know Jesus. And it's amazing, right? It's amazing. And you're seeing it and you're like, no, it's leading these people to at least go to this point where, well, yeah, it looks like there's a creator. There's a divine creator, strategic creator to this whole thing. Well, they're getting closer and closer and closer to understanding this. But if you think about this quantum thing that's happening, right? We're understanding this whole thing. Hey, it was all built for him and by him, and there are rules to this thing, and there's a way that it works. And guess what? If you're interested in knowing more about it, just ask him and he'll show you, because he's alive and he speaks. The question ultimately is, are you interested? And so this conversation isn't an evangelical conversation about you need to get saved, brother. No. This conversation, are you interested in understanding how it's all put together and how you fit into this and what role you play? Because the biggest thing is, the spirits, Satan himself, is lying to us. You're lower than the angels, right? It is upside down. You have forgotten who you are. You have the authority to rule and reign over things. The question is, whose nature and character are you going to do that in? Yours? Or are you going to do that in the nature and character of God? And it's knowable. It really is. And he will walk you through that and show that. My son, we drive to football and basketball in the morning. And he asked me, how do I know it's Jesus? How do I talked to him. I said, who's the greatest teacher that ever lived? He's like, well, Jesus. I said, well, where do you want to go? You want to ask your dad? I'm going to encourage you, but son, go to the greatest teacher who ever lived. Ask him to teach you. That's what I'm on the journey. 51 years old. And I'm like learning. And then I hear this stuff from Steve and I'm like, he came, Carter like brought him to a Texan meetup. I shake his hand. The Lord says, listen to him. I'm like, do you realize the implications of this? I said, hey, I'm called to unlock global generosity by giving. And he's like, I've called them into the transfer. And I think about this and I'm like, the men of the transfer, that's us. You're listening to it. What is the transfer? The transfer is you transferring your authority to Jesus and not just taking it on your own and going your own way. And when you do that, everything that the man has, everything that the man is transferred. This is the kingdom of God. As we follow him, and the greatest, thing of that is, what is the result of it? There are benefits of it. What are the benefits of it? That you're not just making one thing work, he's making it all. You're aligning yourself with the very nature and character and created order of things, and your purpose is really the product. And he says, peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you may test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Renewing of our mind. The battle is for how we think. And the lies. You're a woman. You're a racist. You're a whatever. Everyone's going to try to rename you. No. Ask him. Are you interested? Anyway, what a wonderful thing. It's just amazing breakthroughs, amazing revelations. But a big part of this for me, I was on a call with a buddy right before this. I said, yeah. He goes, yeah, you've been doing this a long time. I said, yeah, it's episode 75. And he's like, I said, what's weird is I don't always feel like doing it, but every time I get done with it, I'm like, I'm so glad I did it. And guys, this is just a reminder for me. Like, I'm just having this conversation with you transparently going, wow, this is really cool. But like anything, even Jesus, while he was walking on this earth, there were scoffers, right? The greatest teacher who ever lived walked the planet, and there were scoffers. So there are always going to be scoffers. There's always going to be people. So that's why I said, for those who have ears to hear. Don't trust me. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Steve. Ask him yourself. Folks, thanks for joining today. Have a great weekend. And bless you, man. I'll tell you what a journey that we're on. Take care, everybody. Don't mess with Texas. See you soon.